morning, everybody. As you heard, my name is Katriel Schory, and I've been the head of the Israel Film Fund until 2 weeks ago, almost 21 years, the head of the Israel Film Center. So I'll tell you a couple of words about myself, and then we'll get going. So after after a long military service in the special combat forces of the Israeli military, I applied for the New York University Film Department, and I was accepted. So I went to America in 1969. As you see, I'm old. I belong to the famous generation of drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And I came to the few months before Woodstock. And I studied in NYU for 4 years, which were quite wild because it was during the Vietnam War and this and that and so on. And then I returned back to Israel in early 1973. And for the first 5 years, I did everything that one can do on a set, which means I worked on all the capacities, line producer, first AD, this and that and everything. I would say that I was 280 days, maybe 300 days out of every year out on location, what the Americans like to call a set animal. And then after 5 years, I felt that I was ready to open my own production company, which I did. And I ran my company for 25 years, so almost 25 years, in which I produced endless amount of hours of television, feature films, production services, you name it. I produced what is considered one of the most successful Israeli feature films of all time, with more than 1 million tickets in the cinema, nominated for the Oscars, the Final Five, Hollywood, red carpet, you name it, and everything. And then 3 or 4 years later, I produced what is considered probably the worst disaster ever in the history of Israeli cinema, with a terrible film in which I didn't manage to get not even 3,000 people into the cinema, and I lost everything I ever had. So I've been there. So I will share with you a little bit of my experiences. During my years, my 21 years as the head of the fund, I greenlighted and authorized more than 300 movies, primarily aimed for the cinema. I would say about 100 of them international co-productions. So I'll share with you what I've learned a little throughout the years, and if I can save you one of the many, many mistakes I made, it will be really great. So, but before I start, I just wanted to know how many of you are directors or would-be directors? Okay. And how many producers or would-be producers? More or less the same. Okay. So I will refer to, I'll use the word filmmakers, okay? So like this, in a way. And you are welcome to ask, you are welcome to argue, you don't have to agree with anything I say, but we'll get going and we'll see how it goes. So I would say that what does it, very briefly, because we don't have much time, what does it take to be a filmmaker, in my opinion, based on my long experience? First of all, I believe that all of us, we decided to hook our life and in this particular art form, which is called cinema, audiovisual, whatever you want. And this is a very powerful art form, probably the most influential and the most powerful art form of our time. And it bears a tremendous responsibility. And for me, this has been, it still is, a very important element, because I believe that we are privileged and we really decided to go into this particular way of life and so on, but I think that it bears a tremendous responsibility. And I believe that by the fact that we will use it, that we are in this kind of business, we have to never, never forget our values as human beings, and never forget our values as people, as professional filmmakers, and always remember our values and morals. Because as we all know, this particular art form is an art form in which there is a lot of room for variations and manipulations, and it's perfectly okay. And it's perfectly okay because by the mere fact that you'll decide on a camera angle or on a lens, you already made a point, and you already, to a certain extent, manipulate it a bit. And we all know in the cutting rooms and the editing rooms, we can do endless things. So basically, at the end of the day, it stays with us as professional filmmakers, and which we have this possibility to do and express ourselves, but we should always remember our red lines and always remember our values as human beings, our values as professional filmmakers, and always remember that we should be our professional integrity and our, of course, personal integrity. I am not that naive to think that a film can change the life of somebody. But you know, you never know. Sometimes a scene, a picture, a still, whatever, things can happen. So by the fact that we were given the possibility to put our hands and work in this powerful tool, it means that we have to always remember our values and our morals as human beings. The other thing which I think that we should really think about crucial elements, and it has to do with the main subject of what we are talking about. You know, there are things which we take for obvious, but it's not that obvious. I believe that in order to be a professional filmmakers, we have to be curious persons. So you say, well, it's of course, but not everybody is so curious. You can go to life not being that curious person. But we are in the storytelling business, and we should be super curious. You okay? So we should be really super curious persons because we are constantly on a lookout for a story. We are constantly like hunters, hunting for an idea and a story. And a good hunter is someone who is all the time, his senses are out there. Because what is our real capital? Our real capital is an idea, it's a story. And for this we have to be constantly on a lookout on a story and try to identify and trace an idea which we believe eventually can turn into a film. So we have to be out there and be super curious, try to understand the trends, so try to understand where are we going and so on. And be out there constantly looking because we know that our real capital and what will really get us to make our film is not if we have a great camera or nice microphones. It's if we have an idea, if we have a story that we believe can turn into a film. So I can speak for myself. I have this instinct wherever I go, to the dentist, to the hairdresser, to the airlines, wherever I go, I put my hand in every piece of paper and every piece of something that I go through. Maybe I'll find something. And we all know the story about this little article, which was maybe 100 words, in a small regional newspaper in Northern California, and somebody read it, and it turned to be the famous film Irene Brockovich with Julia Roberts. And it all started from one little article in a small regional newspaper in Northern California. So you never know from where you'll find a story. But we have to be out there and try to see and try to identify stories. The other thing which I believe that we have to also think about it, because you know, many times we are bound with very particular genres, very much serious stories or whatever kind of stories. But really I believe after many years that we have to open up. We live in an era which is very heavy with streaming services and so on and so on. And I really believe. This is mine. Oh, this is yours. Oh. And I believe that we should think many times also in niche ways. In other words, you know, I received throughout the years as the head of the fund maybe few thousand scripts. I read for Berlin, and I read for Rotterdam, and I read for Cannes, everybody, everywhere. And sometimes I ask myself, why do we get more or less the stories along the same lines? And honestly, I really suggest to you to think and open up a little. There's nothing wrong with genre cinema. There's nothing wrong with a good thriller. There's nothing wrong with a good horror film. There's nothing wrong with film for children. You know, I was now a couple of weeks ago at a big conference in Germany, and all of Europe made 39 movies for children, 39 films, which is nothing. Because all the 36 countries of Europe this year produced 1,300 films. 1,300. and only 13.19 for kids. I mean kids, you know, not kids up to the age of 10, 11. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that we can think a little wider. We can think a little more open. I personally, as the head of the fund, authorized and signed and financed 4 zombie movies with taxpayers' money. Who said that the zombie movie is a bad movie? If it's well made, then it's okay. So basically what I'm trying to tell you, that we can open up a little bit. And there's a lot of room for other things. If I keep getting telephone calls from all the festivals in the world asking, tell me, do you have a good comedy? Do you have a comedy? We want to balance the festival with a comedy. Because you go to these festivals, after 10 days you see all these heavy films, all this terrible thing, you want to cut and die. Because it's all like this. And it's nice to balance. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that when you look out on the stories, we should not only go like this Weltschmerz, these tough stories and so on. There is room also for a variety. There's room for niche. There's room for other films because there is a thirst. There is a need, and nobody said that the comedy is low cinema. Not at all. Notting Hill was a great film and it was a great comedy. So basically what I'm trying to suggest to you, to open up a little bit and open up and think about also in wider terms and think about what kind of stories could really work. And then, you know, it's a lot about your senses and about about sensing the trends and so on. It's true that you can tell me nobody thought 3 years ago that Me Too will become such a thing. But it became such a thing. And now, sometimes you can identify a little the trends and see what could work, you know, because if you even receive the money to make your movie, by the time the movie is ready, it's 3 years down the road, or maybe more. Will the film be right 3 years down the road, especially if it's based on a relevant story? So basically, I think that we should really open up a little and really think in more wider terms. The other element which I think that applies to all of us is the element of risk-taking. When we talk about risk-taking, what comes to mind is immediately money. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about a different kind of risk. You know, my suggestion to all of you and also to myself is always to develop 2 or 3 stories in the same time. Have a different story so that you will not stuck on one story. So you develop 3 or 4, 2 or 3 stories in the same time, and then at a certain point, you'd have to decide on one of your stories, of one of your ideas that you pick up and you embark on the journey in the hope that the film will get made. By the moment that you did it, you took a risk because you never know if the film will ever get made. You never know how it will come out, but you decided on a certain project, you lift it, and you embark on the journey to hopefully to make it into a film. By doing that, you took a risk because you made a decision, and before you make the decision, you have to ask yourself endless questions. Why do I want to make this film, etc., etc.? I'll talk with you a little bit later about it. But basically, once you picked it up, you're on a journey and you took a risk. And I'll tell you a half-a-minute story. About 6 years ago, I authorized a production of a kind of a comedy, and the director was also the co-writer. The film was made, Came the big opening night in Tel Aviv, 600 people, it had big stars, paparazzi, television, this, that, everybody showed up, the actors, red carpet, everybody showed up except for one person, the director. I call him up on the cell phone. I said, listen, this is your big night. Where are you? So he tells me on the phone, you know what? I'm not happy with the film I made. It did not come out the way I wanted. I don't feel comfortable with the film I made. So I said, you took with you on this journey 120 people, actor, crew, team, 2, 3 years, and you went on this journey and you took a risk, and it came out the way it came out. It's like your child. You don't turn your back on your child. I have 2 children. They are not tall, blonde with blue eyes, but they're still my children. So you know. So you have to stand by your kid. You took a risk. You embarked on a film. The film came out the way it came out. You don't turn your back. And this is about taking risk, about taking a risk by deciding to pick up one story and get running. When it comes to financial risk, it's a complete different story. You know, I was a producer for 25 years. I can tell you endless stories. And I had the ups and downs with my company. And my only little apartment in Tel Aviv went to the bank 3 times as a guarantee for loans. So basically, I lived 25 years almost in an apartment which belonged to the banks. At the end, I paid, everything is okay. At the age of 65, I finally got my apartment back. I don't recommend, don't do it. I'm not sure it's so good. I don't know if you know the story of about, there are not that many jokes about producers, but you know the story about these 2 producers who meet. And one producer tells the other, listen, I went going bankrupt, the bank are on my back, people are knocking on my door at night, nightmares, I don't know, I'm going to commit suicide. So the other producer says, I don't know what you're talking about. I sleep like a baby. So the other producer says, really? So the other producer says, yes, I wake up every hour and start crying. So these are the lives of producers, but I don't recommend you to risk your apartment for a movie. So basically, when we talk about risk seriously now, for me the risk is really deciding on a project, thinking very carefully why you decided to pick up this project and embark on the journey. The other element which I think is really being as professional as we can. We are in a very dynamic art form. It keeps changing all the time and things like that. If I think about almost my 48 years in the business, I started with film and video and this and that and digital and you name it. And we have to be all the time updated. And we have to be all the time on our toes to understand the technology and what it allows us. And also understand what we can do with it. And we have to be as professional as we can. So it doesn't necessarily mean that as a director or a producer, I have to know like a DOP or a sound person or all of that. Not at all. But I have to be knowledgeable enough to be able to conduct a professional discussion with these people. Because, you know, the most natural instinct for a director is to want the sky and the stars and everything. And the most natural thing for a DOP is to have a truck with all the lenses in the world. And the most natural thing for a sound guy is to have a truck with all the microphones in the world. It's perfectly okay. But this is where we come in. And this is where we come in. And we have to have a professional talk with these guys in order to always remember to balance between our dreams, our hopes and wishes, and what we have in the pocket. And this balance is crucial. But this balance is also crucial in the talk between the producer and the director. Because for me, there are only 2 horses who lead the carriage. The producer and the director, the producer, whichever way you want to put it. But we have to be professionals. And we have to be able to talk to all our people and know enough about what we are talking about. And then I want to tell you something about where I personally lost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in my life. And you know about what it is. You know, usually we all take a lot of attention about the casting, and rightly so, because the actors on the screen will carry our story, and we have to be super careful in deciding about the cast, the actors. If we fail, we lost the movie. And this is perfectly okay. But we do not take enough care about casting the right crew for the right film. The right crew for the right film. And I lost thousands of dollars in my life. It's about relationship, it's about friendships, it's about all kinds of things. But sometimes you have to be strong. The fact that the DOP was with me in the kindergarten doesn't mean that he's right for the film. The fact that the wardrobe designer was once my lover doesn't mean that she's right for the film. We have to be very, very clear about casting the right crew for the right film. At the end of the day, we have 2 teams, the team which is in front of the camera and the team which is behind the camera. And we have to always remember the team behind the camera and make sure that they are right for the film that we make. And so for me, there are basically two persons, as I said, who really carry all of that. So basically, when we talk about our particular art form, it's a very particular art form. It's the newest one, what, 130, 140 years. And it's a little bit like opera, like theater in a way. Why? Because we take a lot of ancient canonic art forms, like music, like painting, like whatever you want, that goes into creating a new art form, which is called a movie. Which means that the production designer and the composer and the DOP and all the heads of departments are all artists in their own right, and rightly so. Some of them with a huge ego, and it's also perfectly okay. And our main task, in a way, is how do we create the conditions for all these artists to give us the best of the talent, the best of the art, to the benefit of our screen, but within a given framework. Within a given framework. And this is a tremendous challenge. In many ways, we, among the other things that we have to do as directors and producers, is to be these great integrators that go and take all these different art forms, which go in and integrate themselves to become a new art form, which is called a movie. And this is one of the basic challenges that we have. It's one thing to manage 10,000 bank tellers, and it's another thing to manage 30 or 40 creative people. This is very exciting, but also very challenging, because we manage time, we manage money, and we manage creative people. And this is not easy also for big professional directors and managers, because they don't know how to deal with creative people. And for us, this is a very strong element. And here I come to something which I'm not sure that we are always aware of that, and I'm not sure you can teach it in a way, but we should really be aware. And this is the element of leadership. Basically, we, the producers and the director, the producers, are the leaders of the film. That they have to understand that they are the leaders of the film. People look up to you. People want to know that they're in good hands. People want to know that the two horses, they know where they take the movie. You know, making a film, to a certain extent, it's an act of faith. A lot of anxieties, a lot of uncertainties. You embark on the set, you don't know how it's going to end up. And people want to know that they are in good hands, that they have the two leaders up there, and they can look up to and get the confidence that these leaders are really know where they are going. And when we talk about leadership, I can give you a very simplistic definition of what is leadership, the way they taught me when I was an officer in the Israeli military. Three basic things. You lead by saying, you lead by doing, which means giving personal example, and you lead by who you are and what you stand for. And if people will realize that, and if people will get this confidence, and they will know who you are and what you stand for, they will go with you. Because it's about engaging the people. The crew will not go with you because you know to make a great budget, or because you know to make a nice breakdown. They will go with you if you can create the spirit and engagement. And we all know that we may get the camera crew or the electrician crew. We just finished 10 days ago a movie. Now they're in our movie, and in maybe 6 or 7 or 8 weeks they will be in another movie. But we waited 3 or 4 years for this moment. Finally, we managed to get all the finances and the budget and this and that. And for us, it's the big moment. How do you engage them? How do you engage them to embark with you on this journey? This has to do with leadership. Not everybody is a leader. Maybe it comes with the nature. But we have to be aware. You can have a very talented director who doesn't have this leadership thing. But then you come next to him as a producer, and you give him that. you give him, because this is an element that we don't always think. It's not enough to be a super talented director. You have to have this thing that you can engage a bunch of 60, 70, 40, 10, whatever people, and just they will go with you. And this is something that we have to sometimes bear in mind. The other thing which I would like just to mention very quickly is the thing which was what I call creative discipline. And creative discipline is something which we have to understand. And you know, maybe some of you are also in documentaries, I'm not sure, I don't know. But you know, this new technology allows us to shoot as much as we want. And then I get these guys who come to me, and for a 1.5 hour, a 90-minute documentary, they let the camera run for 200 hours, 300 hours, because the material is cheap. So they run this 200 or 300 hours, and they have to cut out a 1.5 hour film. And in my opinion, it's crazy, because the eye to grasp 200 or 300 hours is unbelievable madness. And what does it mean? And then what I see, that they are in the cutting room trying to find within this 200-300 hours the film, and trying to find and create a structure. And for me, this is a big question about creative discipline. Because what do we have now? We have a situation that we let the camera run, and then we say we will construct the story in the cutting room, in the editing room. Now the directors came to me now in recent years, and they start crying that the editor who sits next to them to edit the film is making 4 or 5 times the money that they make. Of course he makes more money. You gave him 120 editing sessions, so he makes a lot of money, of course. Not only that, now the editors are asking to share the credit of the director, because they say, I sit next to the director, and we are both trying to find the story in this 200 or 300 hours that we shot. So basically what I think, even if you do, let's say, a follow-up type documentary where you follow up a certain activity for 1 year or whatever, still you should have an idea. You should have an outline. You should have a list of elements. You should have some kind of a script, and not go out and shoot forever. Because this is something that someone will have to pay at the end. And because nowadays a lot of things are possible in the post-production, so everybody, I hear it, I will take care of it in the post. I will take care of it in the post. Airplanes flying, I'll take care of it in the post. In the post, in the post. And the post is very nice. Someone will have to pay for the CGIs, for the ADRs, for whatever you want in the post. So we have to understand that we have the super privilege of very cheap material and camera that can run forever, but at the end we have to be and to know what we want, what kind of film we want, and not just let the camera run and say, I will figure it out in the cutting room. So creative discipline is something which I really believe that we should really consider and take it seriously, because at the end it's money, it's time, but also it's a heavy thing on us. So we should be careful before we push the camera. What do we want? And what do we want, and how it's going to go inside the film and the structure of the film. So I would like also to say a couple of words about producers. Basically, to put it in a simplistic way, there are 3 basic kinds of producers, if you like. One is what we call the creative producer. A producer who is very good with content, can work as a script editor, as a script doctor, can be there for the bouncing and the ping pong with the director or with the writer, can be there from one draft to the other draft and the other draft, and is very much into really working in content and good with the content. The other producer is what we call this financial engineer, this guy who's really very good with money, who understands how to talk to potential financiers, who really knows how to talk to bankers, etc., etc. But it's also someone who is completely hands-on on what's going on in the world in terms of potential financiers. And believe me, it's an ocean of information now. There are more than 130 film funds in the world. State funds, national funds, regional funds, city funds, all kinds of tax incentives, tax breaks, all a huge amount of information, broadcaster, television stations, you name it. And all the regulations keep changing all the time. And in order to be on top of it, it's time to be constantly updated and to know how to hook up the Luxembourg Film Fund with the Belgian Film Fund, with this, and so on. This is time, and it's possible, but it's a sea of information that all the time keeps updating. So the second type of producer is what I call this financial wizard that can put all the pieces of the puzzle together and has all the information. The third kind of producer is what I call the producer who came from down under, which is a producer who was out there hands-on, who was for a long time a line producer, a first assistant director, who understands the nuts and bolts of the set, of the location. Someone who can get a script, make a breakdown, tell you it will take 24 days to shoot, the below the line will be 700,000 euros, and you know that this is how it will be. These are people who are like set animals, who really understand the life of the set. Personally, I believe that nowadays, to have all these three elements in one human being, in one person, is almost impossible. Almost impossible. And it has to do a lot with time management. And it has to do a lot with our own soul searching as filmmakers. What do we like the most in the arc of making the film? What do we think, where do we think we can contribute the best in the arc of making the film? And also acknowledge our strengths and weaknesses as filmmakers and know, I am not so good with looking for the finances. I'm good for this and maybe not for that. But basically, I believe that nowadays, to be able to take care and devote enough time to be with your director and writer in the development process and draft after draft, or be looking for all the big money to come in, or being out on the set where the money is being spent, it's almost impossible. So we have to really think about ourselves. What kind of producers are we? What do we want from ourselves? Where do we see ourselves? And what do we want to be, and where we can contribute the most in the arc of making the film. And this is something that it may take a bit of time. You don't always know, but once you are in for a bit of time working in the industry, you can identify for yourself, what do I really like the most and where I can really be best. So this is another element that we have to understand. The other element which I think is something which I see in Europe and I see in all of the countries, including the country that I come from. And this is the thing about producers. Now I'll talk about producers for a minute, only producers. You know, most of the project that you will see here in the pitching, last year, I've been coming here for 9 years now, yes? So all the pitchings here, and where I go, all the platforms, Berlin, this, that, everything, 95% of all the projects that we see in all the tables are initiated and triggered by directors. It's not bad, it's okay. But here I'm coming to ask about producers. We don't see, maybe hardly a handful of projects that you can say that they were initiated and triggered by producers. You hardly see it. And my question always to producers are, why are you a producer? Why you decided to be a producer? This is not an easy life. Don't you have as a producer something to say, something to tell, something to say and tell? Didn't you read a book, had a dream, read an article as a producer and say, this is the film I would like to make? We don't see it. Most of the producers in Europe are sitting in front of the grocery store and are waiting for the director to come to them with the stories. It's okay, but I think that as producers, we should really balance a little. All my years, 25 years as a producer, more than half of all the films and projects I ever produced were my ideas. I didn't wait for directors to come to me. It's okay, but you should really balance. I'm not saying that the producer cannot contribute to the director, and when the director comes to him, the producer does not have an input. He does. He definitely does. But sometimes you have to ask yourself, what do I want for myself as a producer? So I'm not saying that it should be the rough American way, but there's nothing wrong for a producer buying an option on a book and then hiring a screenplay writer and paying for writing the script and then casting the right director for the film and be the one who initiate the project. And I don't see it. And I can tell you for myself, every time that the director came to my office and said, I want you to produce for me my film, I showed him the door. I am not in this game. I am not in the game that I want you to produce for me my film. You want to work together? You want a real genuine partnership? Let's talk. But the idea of I want you to produce for me my film, not with me, with all due respect, and I gave up on quite a number of projects because I refused to be at all in this kind of relationship. And this is something that we have to really understand. I get phone calls all the time of graduates, young directors. Tell me, to what producer shall I go? What do you recommend? To what producer shall I go? And this is, I think, not the right question. The right question that a director should ask himself or herself is really, what do I want from my producer? What could be the right producer for me? What kind of dialogue I would like to have with my producer? What kind of teamwork I would like to have with the producer? To put it in a funny, extreme way, do I want a producer that will be there 24/7 for me? That will be my mother and father and priest and rabbi and psychologist? Or do I want a producer that will be this remote uncle in Australia that sends me every 2 weeks a check and never asks questions? What do I want? What will be the right producer for me, and what kind of relations I want with the producers? Once I, as a director, are very clear in my mind, then I can start thinking who will be the right producer for me. So first of all, the directors have to ask themselves what kind of producers they want. I worked with all kinds of directors. I had directors who called me 2 o'clock in the morning because they had a dream and an idea. That's okay, but at least the relationship were very clear and identified. And the same goes for producers. The producers should also ask themselves, what kind of relationship I want with a director? What kind of a dialogue I want? What will be the right director for me? Do I want a director who is really a team player, or a director who is super individual and he doesn't talk to anybody and he keeps all his ideas for himself? What kind of relationship? Personally, I really believe that a producer and a director should have a really genuine, open, candid relationship as real partners, and not have this thing and just work together on really basing the relationship on a very solid and basic trust. Because whichever way we look at it, it will be a journey that will take 3 to 5 years. And this journey can be a honeymoon, can be a nightmare, or something in between. And we have to understand. And once we are absolutely open and clear and candid, we will understand also how do we balance between what our wishes and hopes and dreams are and what can we really do with the money we have. Balancing the hope so that we can take the film all the way to the end. Because I believe that the worst thing that can happen to all of us, that instead of we directing and producing the film, the constraints, the compromises, having to tear pages from the script and this and that, they will end up directing our film. And instead of having a film, we will end up with a chicken without feathers. And this is terrible. It's really terrible. But once we understand the whole arc, we understand exactly where we are. And I've been facing it like every day of my life. And I'll give you one or two very simplistic, stupid examples. When I see a guy, producers, that now put €500,000 in the pre-production and the production and all of that, but because they swallowed the other budget items, they are left maybe with 500 euros for the music. And then they come crying to me and say, you know, we have only 500 euros left for the music. And I say, fuck, you know, you just put 500,000 euros to shoot the film and you left for yourself only 500 euros for the music? Are you crazy? You don't see the overall arc of making the film. We have to see the overall arc of making the film. And we have to balance and understand that the post-production there, it's heavy nowadays. And music in some movies are super crucial, I don't have to tell you. So how can you build and only leave for yourself few hundred euros at the end for the music? Which means people did not balance, did not see the overall picture and the overall what is really need, all the way from the idea all the way to the poster. From the idea to the poster, we have to see all the time the overall picture. And this is why we have to be there and understand what we do. But basically, honestly, I believe that the producers should really initiate. You know, all my years as a producer, every year I'll put aside whatever I could, 3,000 euros, 5,000 euros, 1,000 euros, 10,000, depends on the year. And this was only for looking for projects and stories and ideas, buying few options on books, taking a bunch of guys to go and research some things, maybe there is a story out there. I used to take my film students and ask them to go to all the weekend newspapers, news magazines, everything, periodicals from the regions, maybe they will find a story. Maybe they will find an idea. This is R&D. It's like research and development. It's like in the high-tech everywhere, because this is our real capital. And there's nothing wrong with a producer doing that and looking for stories and just being the initiator. So I'm not saying that we should be like Sir and Laura David Putnam, the famous producers of the 1980s, 90s in America, in the UK, that out of the 23 movies that he produced, 21 were his ideas as a producer. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying also to be the harsh, tough American system, which I know very well. But I think that we should really balance our act as producers. So I will just now change my hat for a moment, and I will talk a little more from a funder's point of view. And this is really what I've learned, because as you know, I submitted to the same fund that I managed many of my projects in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s. I was refused many times, I received few times, but I've been on both sides of the table, and I know how it is, and I didn't forget what it is. So basically, when we talk about funders, in general terms, all the funders, all the potential funders, whether they are state fund, film fund, or bored millionaire who doesn't know what to do with his money, we would like to get 3 basic answers to 3 basic questions. The first question is the what. What's the story all about? So we will get an answer from the script, and we will get an answer from all the papers which are out, you know, the synopsis, this and that. So we get an idea of the what. What's the story all about? And that's perfectly okay. The second question that we would like to get an answer is the question of the how. How the words, how the description, the narrative will be translated to images on the screen. And this has become nowadays super crucial. Let's say 25 years ago, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the script was everything. The script. Not anymore. The script is only one element. The script is basically a blueprint, a very important blueprint, but a blueprint. We all want to know about the cinematic vision, about the cinematic language, about really to see if the director has a distinct cinematic language. And nowadays is almost as important as the script. This is why I really urge you, and I suggest and recommend to you, think it very carefully to be able to be ready with an answer on the how. I have colleagues that they take it to extreme. Directors of film funds, the director of Arte Cinema in France, they will not even begin to read the script before they see your previous works, before they see your previous shorts, because they want to see that you have a very clear and distinct cinematic language. If they identify that you have a clear cinematic language, they'll say, now I'm going to read your script. This is an extreme. I'm not sure it's right. But I'm really telling you, the question of the how nowadays is extremely important. We ourselves, I myself, all my years in the fund, part of the decision-making process was to see the previous works of the director. Or if he gave me a trailer, or a mood board, or stills, or references of other films, to be able to get as much as I can the sense of the distinct language, of the distinct cinematic language of the director. And we all know the story about Orange Cinema. You know, Orange, the cell phone in France, they have a big film fund, 25, 30 million euros. And there was this lady, my old friend, that she was running this fund. And she decided to go for a project, and her bosses told her, "You are crazy, it's suicide." But she said, "I'm going to go." And she put 5 or 6 million euros into a film against her bosses. And it ended up being the famous film, I don't know if you saw it, called The Artist. Remember The Artist? The Artist, when you think about it on paper, it didn't make any sense. A silent movie, black and white, a story which takes place somewhere in the 1920s, God knows what, didn't make any sense. But she identified a certain cinematic language with this director. And she took a tremendous risk, and the rest is history. So basically, what I really recommend to you, really have with you a clear sense of your cinematic language when you go out to pitch your project, when you go out to present your project. Have it absolutely clear in your mind, because this question will come up. And people nowadays, they want to know the how, the how. The third question, which always comes, and it can come in a nice way, sometimes not in a very nice way, and you can of course argue about this question, is the question of the why. Why do you want to make this film? You come to me, you want from me $500,000 of taxpayers' money. Why do you want to make this film? So many times people don't give an answer and get a little angry. I don't have to give you an answer, why do I want to make this film? I'm an artist. This is the film I want to make. When a painter begins to paint, it doesn't have to be an explanation why he paints. But we are in the business which has a lot of money involved. So we have to be clear, why do we want to make this film? And many times people hesitate in the answer, and it's not good. You have to be absolutely clear with your mind. So you have the director's statement, the producer's statement that sometimes are attached to the script and so on. Still be clear with yourself, why do I want to make this film? And why do I want to make this particular film? And this is something that people will ask you. And they can ask you in a nice way, and they can ask you in a blunt way, depends with whom you talk. But the question will come up one way or the other. So my suggestion and recommendation for you is to be absolutely clear on the why. And here I want to tell you again a half-a-minute story. Way back in the 1980s, before the invention of the fax, computers and so on, I sent the whole idea of a mini-series to the German TV, the ZDF, the second channel. At that time in the 80s, there were very few TV channels, and every television channel was very strong and so on. I sent to the head of the drama, this and that, 3-4 months, teleaccess and this and that. At the end, he came back to me, we set up a meeting. I went to Germany, to this huge building, 3,000 people, you already feel intimidated. And then I entered into his office, was this big fat German guy, the head of the drama of the German TV. And I came to him, and then he tells me like this with a hand, "Take 5 minutes and tried to convince me why I should take 300,000 euros for my budget and give to you. I said, I send you the scripts, I send you this, we were in touch with the telexes and this and that, so I guess that you like my story. So I said, yes, I like your story, he said. But I have here on the table 3 or 5 other beautiful stories. So again with the finger, why you? It's not very nice, not very pleasant. This was the guy. You meet all kind of people as you travel in your life and you try to raise finances and so on. And we have to be ready with our answers. But what I understood throughout the years, that it's not enough that we have a great script. And sometimes it's not enough that we have a director's note and a producer note. Sometimes you have to help the reader to understand better the universe from where the story comes. What do I know about Ukraine? So I'm a curious person. My grandmother was born in Odessa, so I'm interested in Ukraine. I know a little bit maybe more. But what do I know about Ukraine? I know very little. Sometimes it's not enough the script. Sometimes you have to help the reader to get a tiny bit of information about the universe, about the world from where the film comes, so that I will get a tiny bit of more information and I will be able to understand why the characters act the way they act, what motivates them to act the way they act. Something about the place, about the country, about the region, but a tiny bit of information, and then I'll say, now I understand the added merits, the additional values of the story, which not automatically comes from a script, even if it's written in the most professional way. Sometimes we have to position the story for the reader. Sometimes we have to help him understand a little better from where it comes and so on. It's not automatic. People don't know a lot about where we all come from. And many of our stories, or most of our stories, come from our own backyard. And it's perfectly okay. And they can come from our own backyard and be local stories and still being also universal. But sometimes we have to help the readers. Believe me, I read for all those big platforms in Europe, stories from Bangladesh, from you name it, from wherever you want. And sometimes I need a little bit of few lines to understand a little better the universe from where the story comes. You cannot take it for granted. Believe me, you cannot take it for granted. So remember this whole thing of the 3 questions: the what, the how, and the why. And the 4th thing has to do more with the way you present your story. The way you present the story. If you come to me and the way you present it, I want to make this film very much. I really would like very much to make this film. But if it will not work, I have in my pocket 1 or 2 other films. This is one way of putting it. But if you come to me and you say, this is the one film that I want to make, this is the film that I want to make, I don't have any other film, it's burning in my bones, I will do it no matter what, the way you present it and how much you engage with the story, for some of my colleagues, it can make a difference. It can make a difference. So what I suggest that even if you are not and you have other stories in your pocket, do it the way it is, even fake it in order to make it. Do it. And so really, you should really understand. And the why is very important. People used to come to me and submit to the fund a nice comedy, and I will ask, why do you want to make this comedy? And they said, you know what? Maybe with this comedy I'll finally have a nice box office and I'll be able to make a bit of money. I said, you know what? For me it's okay. You know why you want to make the film. I was a student in NYU and I have a teacher and used to tell us to repeat after him. Follow me. When you produce for the masses, you will live like the classes, in a nice house with swimming pool and so on. When you produce for the classes, the intellectuals, you will live like the masses, in some of the strange buildings in the entrance of the city. So remember, when you produce for the masses, you live like the classes. When you produce for the classes, you live like the masses. You don't have to do it. But it's nice to balance a little the act. And I, as a producer, had a daily game show on TV, and I had 2 weekly television programs of studio stuff, and I did documentaries, and I did feature films, and I did a lot of production services, some of them to the most terrible movies in the world, like Rambo 3 with Stallone. But I had to find a way to balance my act as a producer. But always remember, why am I a producer and what I want out of myself as a producer. So really, we have to really do our own soul searching about all of that. So what I would like also to say with you, a couple of words, is also about what it is, what goes with the kind of life that we decided to take upon ourselves. And what really takes, I will not talk so about co-production, because if you'll come tomorrow, there's a whole session of co-productions, right? So I will leave it for tomorrow. You will hear if those of you will come. But if you want, I can talk a little about it, because personally, I have my questions about co-productions, and I'm not sure that it's a magic formula. And we have to ask ourselves millions of questions about co-productions. Why do we want it, and so on. And personally, I believe that if we decide to embark on a journey of international co-productions, which I guess you need, we need, many of us who come from small countries, but we have to enter into embark on this journey eyes wide open and really understand why we want, ask ourselves all the questions, understand where we draw the line, understand exactly where our red lines once we embark, because it's a partnership, and partnership is a partnership, and a partnership is like marriage, and it's many times you marry someone from other countries or from your other countries, and it's a big question. And marriage, as you know, has to do a lot with compromise. I'm married to the same woman 42 years. Believe me, I know 1 or 2 things about compromises. It's not so easy, but you have to understand, this is part of life once you take in partners. So international co-productions are good, but we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Those of you who will come tomorrow to the sessions, you will hear me talk maybe a little more co-productions. But what I would like to tell you, we live, all of us, once we decided to embark and take upon ourselves this life, we live in a selective world. Basically, all the systems in the world, all the systems all over the world are based on a selective process. There are much more talent, and there's much more stories, and much more great talented filmmakers than there is money and time. And this is why, no matter where you are, in all the countries in the world, it's based on a selective process. And when we talk about the selective process, we have to be absolutely clear about the film that we want to make, and I'm taking you back about the questions and so on. And you have to be absolutely clear about the story, and it should be really the draft that we feel that this is the draft that we should really present, and we have to decide when to embark and present our stories, and when is the right timing. But when we talk about the selective world, we have to understand that we will have to deal with 3 basic situations. The first situation is that we will have to live with negative answers. We will submit, and we will have to learn how to live with negative answers. I made a calculation all my years as a producer. From all the project that we ever developed, maybe 20% got made, 20%. All the rest, we developed. So, and this is more or less the average. So we have to learn how to live with negative answers. So it's very easy for me to stand here and talk with you. We are all human beings, we have feelings, and we have emotions and so on. But the fact, and this is how they trained me in America as a student, the fact that I got a negative answer on a project which I submitted to the fund or whoever has nothing to do with me as a human being, has nothing to do with me as a professional filmmaker. It has to do with the fact that this particular project did not generate interest. Did not generate interest. So it's again easy for me to say, but we have to remember that the fact that we received a negative answer from the fund or whoever has nothing to do with us as professional filmmakers. It has to do with the fact that this particular project did not generate interest. It's easy to say, but this is part of life, and this is the kind of life that we have taken upon ourselves. The second element which goes with it, there comes a moment that you took your project, you took your script in which you put your blood, sweat, and tears, and you present it to all the funds in the world, and to all the television stations, and to private investors, and whoever you want, and you travel with it 3, 4, 5 years, and it did not take off. It didn't happen. Comes a moment, a very tough moment, in which you have make a tough decision and shelf your project. Shelf the project. Put it back in the drawer and say maybe 5 years from now, maybe 7 years from now, the zeitgeist, the trends, whatever will be right for my story. I can pull it out and submit it. This is a tough moment. It's a very tough moment to make a decision of shelving the project. It's tough. But sometimes we have no choice, because as filmmakers, as I said, I think that we can juggle 3 or 4 projects in the same time and give it more or less a proper attention. We cannot juggle 8, 9 projects. Even as a production company, we can juggle 3 or 4 projects at the same time and give it the reasonable attention. So there comes a moment in which you have to shelve the project. So I had a teacher, well, a guest lecturer at NYU. His name was Robert Altman. You know the name, this director. He was a fucking asshole, a terrible man. And he was trying to break our spirit as filmmakers, as students. And he used to tell us, listen, dumbheads, if you decided to become filmmakers, you should always remember that humiliation and abuse will become your second name. This is terrible to say to students. And sometimes you walk with a sense of maybe abuse or humiliation because you got this negative answers, and who are these readers, and who's this fucking head of a film fund, and this and that. But this is the life, and this is part of the life that we have taken upon ourselves. The third element is the element which I think that to a certain extent we are all in the business of waiting. We wait. We wait for answers from funds, from television stations, from our co-producer partners, and we wait and we wait. In the meantime, life goes by. And this is something that we have to take in consideration, especially directors and writers. Producers can balance a little more their act. And if you think about it, even a good, successful, working director in Europe will make what? Every 4, every 5, every 6 years a movie. And this is already not bad, huh? And I'm not talking about some exceptions like Luznitsa and so on, but basically, on average, every 4 or 5 years. And what in between? And how do you bridge this endless waiting in between? And this is a question that we have to ask ourselves, first of all, as human beings and as filmmakers. And how do we balance our life? I had a guy coming to me the other day, a director in Israel. He was sitting in front of me, and he said, you know what? My family just celebrated for me my 60th birthday. And you know what? I made 3 movies. And it was a heartbreak. And it was really sad. But this is life in a selective world. In a selective world, this is life. And we have to understand, how do we balance our act? How do we balance our life so that we can really go through life without getting really down with this never-ending waiting? So personally, what I decided to do, at least where I come from, is to create in the fund a super low budget truck in which I say to the guys, I will help you make your films, but the film should be no more than, let's say, 100,000 euros, 80,000 euros, really super low budget, and just go and do. go and do. And since 2007, I authorized about 40 feature films only on super low budget, in which we said there's no threshold of quality. For me, you can shoot in an iPhone, you can edit at home, you can do what you want, but you must keep on doing. And I introduced this guerrilla filmmaking, this super low budget, and it's been working while the people are waiting for the big money, while the people are waiting for the big budget. In the meantime, to go and do. It's about hope, and it's about breaking the never-ending waiting. But in this particular track, if I take a couple of minutes, you have to change your way of thinking. You have to understand that you are going to develop now write a script for a super low budget and think in vertical terms and not in horizontal terms. What do I mean? You have to write a story that you can hang the story on 2-3 characters, no more, because you will not have money for more. And you have to hang the story on 2-3 locations because you will not have money for more. So in the case of super low budget, you have to write and develop thinking production. Usually we tell the writer, run with your dream. Here we don't tell the writer, run with your dream. Here we tell him from the beginning, think in the terms of this particular framework and write a story that can fit into this super low budget. And you know what? In this particular track, I had probably the biggest surprises. And we had films which were made for less than 100,000 euros, who went to Tribeca and to Sundance and won prizes and this and that. And you know what? And I'll tell you now, a tiny little story, a pitch for 1 minute, of less than 1 minute, like the Americans like, what is called a high concept pitch, where you can tell a story in less than 1 minute, of a story, of a film, which became a tremendous success. So this guy walked into my office, this director, and he told me, I have an idea, I wrote a script, I want to tell you, I want you to help me. I said, okay, tell me your story. So he said like this. A young man and a young woman meet in a bar. They don't know each other. So they sit in the bar, they're both in the late 20s, early 30s, and they sit in the bar, so they start talking to each other, a little bit of verbal flirting and this and that. After 4 or 5 minutes, the woman, the girl, as some of the Israeli girls are, she tells him, listen, let's cut the bullshit. My place or your place? Before he answers, she tells him, let's go to my place. And we all know for what. They go into his car to go to her place, and for 70 minutes, they cannot find parking. Tel Aviv. I said, you know what? Take the money, go and make the movie. What do we have? When you think about it, a young man and a young woman, they just met. All they want, we know what they want. Now, they are dying to find parking for their fucking car, and they cannot find the parking. In the meantime, they are both in the car, so they get to know each other, and we get to know them. So basically, it's based on a very witty dialogue, and 2 characters. She's more abrasive, he's a little more shy, and it was shot 7 or 8 nights in Tel Aviv. 80,000 euros. The guy, after that, received 3 offers for remakes, and then in Belgium, I think it's now on stage as a theater, and he became like rich with a lot of money from doing this tiny little film. So basically, I gave you this an example because here in this super low budget, you have to have an idea. You have to have an idea, but you have to have an idea that can fit into this particular framework. But what is more important for young graduates, for people who by now did not make a feature yet, this is a way, this is a bit of hope that you can show, that you can create for yourself a portfolio and say, yes, you see, I made a film, minimum 70 minutes, you can now see it for yourself. Maybe not great cinematography, maybe not great framing, but it's a story, and it's a story that you can go with. And this is basically and for the more veteran filmmakers, is just to break the never-ending waiting. The waiting is a killer. And you have to understand, how do I balance my life? How do I balance the way I want to get through life and have a long career in our business? So this is something which I really wanted to bring up with you. And then if there are any more questions or comments, I'll be very happy to
Yeah,
talk.
actually, you can ask practical questions.
Anything.
Yeah, because you
And
see
you don't have to agree with anything I say, yeah?
Yeah, really. So you raise your hand, you get the mic. Yes,
The
please.
lady
Yeah,
over
okay,
there.
yeah.
Добрый день, меня зовут Сергей.
Oh, you need to.
Скажите, пожалуйста.
Just a moment, just a moment. You need to.
Yes, go ahead.
Добрый день, меня зовут Сергей.
No.
Вопрос такой.
No, does it work?
So you don't translate to me.
Another one. The translators told me not to do that.
Okay, let's try this.
Добрый день, меня зовут Сергей.
Okay. Yeah, just a moment.
Okay, now?
Вопрос такой.
Yes.
В последние годы все чаще в титрах появляются отдельные позиции автор идеи. И это часто не режиссер, не сценарий, не продюсер. Как это работает? В какой форме покупается идея? Спасибо.
It's more, I think that it's what, if I understood your question, is less, I think, on movies or for the cinema, it's more on television series. And on TV series, there is an idea. There is an idea which is developed, and there's somebody who can really dream up with an idea, and then he hires or hooks up with professional writers, etc., etc. And then it could definitely be based on an idea, the same as it can be written as based on a book or a piece of literature, yes? So this can work, and of course, I can tell you, let's say in the case of the fund that I've been managing, if the story or the script was based or is based on a book, the author of the book is entitled to 3.5% as a fee, and 3.5% of all the revenues that the film will make all the life of the cinema, of the film. So he has a chance of making money because it's based on his book, his story, his piece of literature. And it happens now more and more. See, I come from a country in which, because I come from a country which is a crazy country, so 90%, 80% of all the stories that we receive are based on the personal experience of the filmmaker. The Israeli cinema is very low on adaptations. Unlike the British cinema or the American cinema, we are very low on adaptation, in my opinion, too low. Because we have such a crazy life in such a turbulent, unbelievable country, which creates a lot of stories. But definitely, there's a lot of options in the world of literature. And of course, people, I think, at least the countries I come from, do not look enough into this possibility of pool of stories and ideas. But there are a lot of things now, especially in TV series, and where you say the story is based on an idea of.
Okay, yeah, another one. No, we have a microphone here. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Marina. I'm a film director. I'm interesting. Do you have a subject that you're interesting for? You would like to make a movie in your life or right now that you find as a trend or something like that? And in a practical point of view, do you have something that you like to understand project more, like the structure, like the synopsis, the script, bio of the director, or some visual and things like that? And if I can, the last question about the financing, as I understand.
Don't be greedy. There are
Okay.
a lot of different.
Yeah, it just do you invest your money or you look in other fund? If you find the idea, then you understand who will invest money in such idea.
So again, all my professional life, 48 years as a funder and as a producer, looked for projects which were really meaningful, which I believed had a meaning. I never raised flags. I never said we are looking for stories on this subject or that subject from this place or the other place. But definitely stories that I thought can make a difference. Stories with a meaning. Stories that I would like personally to see them on the screen. Stories that really did something to me. And this was always my guidelines. And I never ever compromised on how I felt about the story even when I made game shows or whatever. It had to be something which really I feel comfortable with and I want to do it. And the most important thing for all of us is to be truthful to ourselves. Truthful to ourselves as creative people. Really be truthful to the stories that we read. We don't have to second guess what the other guys want. We will never guess. And we are not in the pleasing business. We are not here to please the commissioning editor or the head of the fund. We are here to make the stories that we really would like to know and which we are really truthful to ourselves with the story that we want to do. I read thousands of scripts in my life. I can easily see when it's a little fake, when it's a little people are trying to please me or second guess what I like. I talk from a funder point of view. No, be truthful to yourself, stick to the way you want to make your story. And as far as financing, there's no producer in Europe and there's no producer anywhere except for America, India, and Nigeria who brings his own money to the table, and maybe now a little bit on Russia. All the producers, what they know and what they do, they know if they're professional to submit, to identify where and what, to whom to submit and who could be interested in their kind of stories, which really goes to making your homework. I didn't talk a lot about co-productions, but honestly, you should really do your homework. Let's say, if I wanted now to submit my film to the head of Arte Cinema France, yes? Which everybody wants to go there because they have money and Arte is the kind of art house type movies. So I know the guy. His name is Olivier Perl. I know, but nowadays you are privileged more than I was in mine because you have Sinandos and IMDb's and Googles and this and that. You can get a lot of information. But if I talk for 1 second about this particular person, I know that for 5 years he was the head of program of the director's fortnight section in the Cannes Film Festival. So I go to the scene, I see the kind of films he selected as a programmer in Cannes, and I get a little bit of his taste. Then I know that he was for 3 years or 4 years the head of the Locarno Film Festival, and he was the head of the artistic director of Locarno. So I see the kind of film that he picked up over there. Then I see the kind of film that he gave money in the last 4 or 5 years as the head of the Arte Cinema. Why? Because I know him. He gets 2,000 scripts a year, 2,000 scripts a year. He has money for what, 10, 15? And he will meet with you maybe once, or maybe twice, no more. Or you will submit once your story, and if he turns down, you will not be able to submit because he will not devote his time. So you have to do your homework. You have to learn about the guy you are going to meet, and you have to understand what is in his mind, what is his taste, what kind of stories he went for throughout his career, and then you come prepared for that. The one thing is clear to all of us. You cannot sing the same song to different financiers. You cannot tell your project to a state fund the same as you tell the story to a commissioning editor and television station or to someone who wants to give you private money. You have to understand the interest and what are the interests of the potential financier and present the story accordingly. I don't know if I answered your question, more or less.
Yeah, I think so. Another one? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you very much. I found your talk very inspirational. I had a question about what is a good story, but you've covered a lot of it already, so I'll rephrase my question. What I want to know as an aspiring writer myself is how do I get my script, my story, to the attention to someone from professional industry? What you personally, having gone through thousands of scripts, look for the most in a script, in a story, on a professional level?
First of all, as you know, if you talk about embarking on this journey, you know that 95% of all the funds in the world will always ask you, it will be a precondition to submit with the producer. You cannot submit your project to the fund I manage, to all the other funds. Tomorrow you will see the head of the funds of Luxembourg, Berlin, and so on. They will tell you the precondition is to submit with a producer. So So first of all, on the practical terms, you will have to hook up at a certain point of a producer in order to embark on the journey of submitting to potential financiers. In terms of the story, there's not a formula for a story. You have to go with what you feel. You have to go with your story. And you have to go with a story that you really feel that this is your story and that you feel comfortable with your story. But you have to be careful about the draft that you submit. You have to be absolutely clear that this is the draft that I can stand behind, that I can defend, that I know exactly why this is the right moment and the right draft to submit. And what I'm saying is not just because of the saying. If you look all the way from Western Europe, all the way down to where we are, in Southern Europe, including Israel, if you see in the UK, Germany, the Scandinavias, the Nordics, the draft that they are going to shoot, the shooting draft usually will be draft 14, draft 15, draft 16, which means that they've been working on the drafts and drafts and drafts until they manage to get the right draft, and this is the draft that they're going to shoot. As we go down in Europe, and we see my dear friends in Turkey and in Greece and former Yugoslavia, what the draft that they're going to shoot is draft 4, which means because of money, because of all kinds of reasons, they did not work enough on the draft, which is the right draft at the right moment to go and shoot. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that you should really work on your draft and say, this is the draft that I'm going to send in. You know, the most precious thing that many people in my position that I was the head of the fund is time. Time. We are super busy. You know, I got every year, because I come from this particular country, I received every year in this crazy Israel almost 250 fully developed scripts for movies. And the money we had was for 12. 250 and 12. Not even 5%. So the best thing that you want for me, a person in my position, is that you manage to cross and you manage to get me enough interested to ask you one question. Send me the script. Because when I tell you send me the script, it means that I'm going to devote now 2-3 hours and read your script. And this is already something. Because no one in the world will make a decision not based on a full script. But for you, the first hurdle to cross is, first of all, send me the script. When I heard from Olivier Per, the guy from Arte, the word send me the script, I know that I moved already one line. I moved one stage. Because we take our time now to read your script, which is already a stage. But you have to be ready, you have to send a draft that, first of all, you live in peace with it, more than anybody else.
Unfortunately, we just have time for the last very quick, very short question. Yeah. Okay.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Лена. Спасибо огромное за содержательный рассказ, что вы поделились с нами частью вашего опыта. Но я бы хотела еще узнать совсем чуть-чуть о промоушене готовой картины, а именно меня интересует, насколько принимает участие в разработке рекламной кампании изначальная креативная команда фильма, или вы отдаете как-то на откуп рекламным агентствам, то есть насколько вовлечена изначальная креативная команда. Спасибо.
How much time do I have?
Like 1 minute.
1 minute.
Yeah, right.
А видео?
Talking about the promotion.
I have a whole separate lecture on that. Basically, I will give you one line, which is my personal belief, okay? I believe that the people who put their neck on the line 3, 4, 5 years to make the film, which is the producer, the director, the producing team, should always have a say and should always try and control the fate and the destiny of their movie. This is my belief. What you see many times in many countries, that you, all of you, that put your blood, sweat and tears to make the film, Finally, you have the film. Finally, the baby is born. And then what do? You give it for adoption. You give it to a distributor, and you hope that he will do the job right. But you can have a nice family that will take care of your film, or you can give it to a distributor that will put it on an automatic pilot, will send it 1 week to the cinemas, and the film is dying. So therefore, my suggestion is always the people who will that actually made the film should always be there, even if you give it to a professional distributor. In my case, because I was a producer and because I went through it myself, I encourage the Israeli film industry, and more than 50% of all the Israeli feature films are distributed by the producers, which means that the Israeli producers are only distributing their own films. And the deal is a very simple deal, from the producer directly to the cinema owner. It's a longer story, I don't have much time to go into it, but basically I think that people who put the blood, sweat and tears into making the film should be there and should be part of the control of the faith and the destiny of the film. So just to sum up, because I don't have film, so again I'm going back to my old teacher, Mr. Robert Altman, who used to tell us at the end of every lecture back in 1969, 1970,